I'm Mila, 27, standing under the crystal chandeliers of my father's anniversary gala, gripping a portfolio case worth $45,000. It was my heart on paper, a charcoal sketch I'd spent weeks perfecting just for him. "Happy anniversary, Dad," I said, extending the gift, waiting for a smile. Instead, my sister Madison swirled her champagne and laughed loud enough for the board members to hear. "Cute, Mila. Is that from an adult coloring book? Maybe we can hang it in the staff bathroom." My father chuckled. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just took my $45,000 back and walked away. "Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community." The elevator doors slid shut, cutting off the sound of their laughter like a guillotine. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, pressurized, like the air before a thunderstorm. I watched the numbers count down from the 30th floor. 29. 28. Beside me, Austin loosened his tie. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. He knew exactly what that portfolio contained. He knew that the charcoal sketch wasn't just a doodle. It was study number 4 for my upcoming Ecliptic series, scheduled to headline the contemporary auction at Christie's next month. Opening bid? $45,000. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly as the doors opened to the lobby. "I'm not sad, Austin," I said, stepping out into the cool Chicago night. "I'm calculating." We didn't go back to our apartment. We drove straight to my studio in the warehouse district. The moment I unlocked the heavy steel door, the air changed. The penthouse had smelled of sterile lilies and expensive perfume. Here the air was thick with the scent of turpentine, linseed oil, and stale coffee. It smelled like work. It smelled like truth. I walked over to my desk, bypassing the large canvases covered in drop cloths. I sat down and opened my laptop. The screen glowed, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the dark. "You're going to do it, aren't you?" Austin asked, leaning against the doorframe. I navigated to a folder labeled Family. Inside there was a single PDF document. It was a licensing agreement. A draft I had spent 3 weeks perfecting with my intellectual property lawyer. You see, my father's company, Richard Realty, was struggling to rebrand. They wanted to pivot to a younger, more modern demographic. 4 months, Madison had been talking about trying to acquire the rights to use imagery from the elusive artist Vesper for their new marketing campaign. They had no idea Vesper was the sister they mocked for being unemployed. This contract was going to be my surprise. A gift. An exclusive, perpetual license to use my artwork for their branding free of charge. A gift that would have saved them roughly $200,000 in licensing fees. I looked at the file name. Richard final.pdf. I thought about the years I spent painting in the basement, terrified to make a sound because Madison was on an important business call upstairs. I thought about the way my mother would sigh and tell guests I was finding myself, as if I were lost. They didn't just reject a drawing tonight. They rejected their own salvation. They wanted a businessman in the family, I whispered. "Fine. I'll show them how a businesswoman handles a bad investment." I clicked on the file. I dragged it to the trash bin. Then, with a calm, rhythmic tap of my finger, I emptied the trash. "Deleted," I said. "Permanently?" Austin asked. "Irretrievably." I picked up my phone. I didn't send an angry text. I didn't demand an apology. I simply went to my contacts. Richard, Cynthia, Madison. One by one, I selected block caller. It wasn't an act of pettiness. It was professional necessity. I had an auction to prepare for, and I couldn't afford the distraction of people who couldn't afford me. I stared at the list of blocked names on my phone screen. It felt like amputation. It felt like relief. People always ask why I stayed so long. Why I kept showing up to the dinners, the galas, the birthdays where I was treated like a prop. The answer isn't simple. It's woven into the very fabric of how I was raised. You see, in the Richard Realty household, money wasn't just currency. It was love. It was attention. It was worth. And by that metric, I was bankrupt before I even started. I remember when Madison went to college. She was barely scraping a C average in business administration, partying 4 nights a week. My parents bought her a brand new MacBook Pro, hired private tutors at $100 an hour, and paid for a networking semester in London. They called it investing in the future. I was studying fine arts on a partial scholarship I earned myself. When I needed supplies, I didn't ask them. I knew the answer. Art is a cute hobby, Mila, but we're not throwing good money after bad. So I scavenged. I bought used brushes from estate sales, cleaning the dried acrylic off with harsh solvents until my hands were raw. I painted on discarded plywood I found in alleyways. They didn't see resilience. They saw desperation. And the sickest part? They liked it. It took me years to understand the mechanism of their cruelty. For a long time I thought they just hated me. But hate is active. Hate requires energy. This was something more insidious. It was the trap of normalized cruelty. My parents and Madison didn't hate me. They needed me. They needed a failure to make their mediocre successes look brilliant. Every time they sighed and handed me a check for $50 for groceries, every time they rolled their eyes at my paint-stained jeans, they got a hit of dopamine. They felt benevolent. They felt superior. My struggle was the foundation their ego was built on. If I was the starving artist, then they were the magnanimous patrons. If I succeeded, if I was actually a genius, then their narrative collapsed. Then Madison was just a spoiled brat with a title she didn't earn, and my father was just a checkbook with a pulse. They loved the version of me that was small. So I became Vesper. Vesper wasn't just a pseudonym. She was a fortress. I created her 5 years ago, after my first solo gallery opening. It was a tiny show in a basement in Wicker Park. I had invited them 3 months in advance. I reminded them weekly. That night I stood by the door for 4 hours. They never showed. The next day I saw the photos on Facebook. They had gone out for a steak dinner to celebrate Madison being named Employee of the Month at their company. That night Mila the daughter died. Vesper was born. I started signing my work with that name, a single sharp word that meant evening prayer, because I knew they would never look for it. They would never look for success where they expected failure. I kept Vesper secret not to hide my shame but to protect my joy. I built a career, a reputation, and a fortune in the shadows, letting them believe I was still the girl who needed their pity. But tonight the pity ran out. I looked around my studio. The ecliptic series leaned against the walls, dark and luminous, humming with power. These canvases were worth more than their penthouse. More than their approval. I wasn't the investment that failed. I was the asset they were too blind to value. My phone didn't stop buzzing for an hour. I ignored it, focusing on the texture of the canvas in front of me, but the notifications piled up like dead leaves. I finally flipped the screen over. It was a stream of texts from Madison. Nice exit, drama queen. Dad is furious. We threw the drawing in the recycling bin. Don't worry, we didn't want your art cluttering up the office anyway. Grow up, Mila. You ruined the gala. I didn't feel the old sting of rejection. I felt the cool detachment of a surgeon looking at a tumor. I was about to put the phone away when Austin walked up behind me holding his tablet. His face was lit by the blue glow of the screen and he wore a tight, satisfied smile. I couldn't help myself, he said. What did you do? Check her Instagram story. I opened the app. Madison had posted a video of my sketch, my study number 4, propped up next to a half-eaten plate of hors d'oeuvres. She had added a laughing emoji and the caption, "When your unemployed sister tries to pay rent with doodles. #starvingartist #fail." But it wasn't the post that mattered. It was the comments section. Austin, using his verified account with the blue checkmark, the account he used for appraising high-end assets for venture capital firms, had left a single comment. Provenance. Original charcoal study by contemporary artist Vesper. Confirmed authentic. Current estimated auction value, $45,000. Please handle with care. I looked at Austin. You just lit a match in a gas station. They needed better lighting, he replied. The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 minutes. That was how long it took for Madison to read the notification. Click on Austin's profile, see his credentials, and then type Vesper artist into Google. It was 3 minutes of peace before the war began. My phone lit up. Madison calling. I answered on the second ring, putting it on speaker. I didn't say hello. I just listened to the ragged sound of her breathing. You liar, she hissed. Her voice wasn't apologetic. It wasn't shocked. It was trembling with greedy, self-righteous fury. You manipulative little liar. Hello, Madison, I said calmly. I see the catalog, she shouted. I'm looking at the Christie's website right now. Vesper. That's you? You're Vesper. Yes. And this doodle is worth $45,000? Conservatively. Yes. I expected silence. I expected a moment of realization that she had just thrown away a fortune. But I underestimated the depths of my sister's entitlement. She didn't gasp in horror. She pivoted instantly to ownership. You've been holding out on us, she screamed. All this time you've been crying poor, letting mom and dad pay for dinner when they visited while you were sitting on millions. Do you know how sick that is? I never asked for money, Madison. I refused it. You hid assets, she yelled, using the business terminology she barely understood. You are part of this family. That means your success is our success. We supported you while you played artist in the basement. We tolerated your little hobby. That makes us investors. I looked at the phone, visualizing her face. The vein popping in her forehead. The shark-like glint in her eyes. So you want the sketch back? I asked. The sketch? She laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. No, Mila. I want my cut. You're going to sign over the rights to that artwork for the company branding just like you planned. And then we're going to talk about back pay for the years we supported you. You don't get to become a millionaire on our watch and leave us behind. She didn't see a sister. She saw a lottery ticket she had forgotten to cash. I'm not hiding, Madison, I said, my voice dropping an octave. I was protecting myself. And you just confirmed exactly why. I hung up. The screen went black, but the air in the studio felt electric. The secret was out. The disguise was gone. They knew what I was worth, and now they were coming to collect. I hung up the phone and placed it face down on the desk. The silence in the studio wasn't peaceful. It was the quiet of a sniper adjusting their scope. Madison wanted a war. She wanted to drag me into the mud, to scream and cry and play the victim until I exhausted myself trying to prove I was good enough. That's how it always worked. They created chaos and I paid the emotional tax to fix it. But I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was a business entity. And they had just threatened my assets. She thinks she's negotiating, I told Austin. She thinks this is a family squabble. What is it? He asked. It's a hostile takeover attempt. I didn't text back. I didn't engage. Instead, I opened a new browser tab and searched for Sterling and Associates. They were the most aggressive intellectual property firm in Chicago. Their retainer was $5,000. I paid it without blinking. 30 minutes later, I was on a video call with a senior partner. I didn't tell him about the Thanksgiving snubs or the childhood trauma. I spoke in facts. My name is Mila Warren, professionally known as Vesper. My father's company, Richard Realty, is currently using branding materials, specifically their logo, website headers, and marketing font packages that were created by me 5 years ago. The lawyer nodded. Did you sign a transfer of copyright? No. I did it as a favor. There was no contract. No payment. And now I am revoking their license to use my intellectual property, effective immediately. It sounded cold. It was. But I remembered the day I designed that logo. I was 22, working off a laptop that overheated if I used it for more than an hour. Richard had looked at the final design and said, "It's fine. It'll save us hiring a real professional." He had built his brand on my free labor. Now he was going to learn the cost of a professional. Draft the cease and desist, I said. They have 48 hours to scrub my work from their physical and digital assets. If they miss the deadline, we sue for retroactive licensing fees at current market rates. Understood, the lawyer said. Anything else? Yes. I walked over to the storage closet in the back of the studio. I pulled out a dusty cardboard box labeled returns. Inside the box were the gifts I'd tried to give them for years. Small paintings, sketches, hand-painted silk scarves. Every one had been returned with a polite grimace or abandoned at restaurants. "We don't have room for this clutter, Mila," my mother had said last Christmas, handing back a small oil painting of the Chicago skyline. I pulled that painting out now and flipped it over. It was signed Vesper. "I have a collection of early works," I told the lawyer. "Provenance is clean. I'm consigning them tomorrow. Title the catalog The Rejected Collection." I wasn't just selling art. I was monetizing their rejection. The next day, my lawyer sent an email with no subject, only a red flag icon. Attached was a document titled Project Phoenix, Investor Pitch Deck, Confidential. Richard Realty wasn't rebranding. They were insolvent. The deck was a desperate attempt to secure $10 million from foreign investors. Slide 12 stole my breath. My artwork, study number 4, the sketch they'd thrown away, was displayed as the face of the new company. Worse, the appendix contained a contract granting them 10 years of commercial rights to the Vesper catalog. Signed with my name. Forged from a birthday card. It's fraud, the lawyer said. Wire fraud. Identity theft. If this goes public, they're facing prison. Austin went pale. Helios Capital is my client. I know their managing partner. They hadn't just stolen my work. They'd pitched it to my boyfriend's investors. They bet on my silence, I said. They bet I wouldn't look. 2 hours later, my parents stormed into my studio frantic. The deal had collapsed. Helios was demanding an audit. My mother begged me to sign a backdated addendum. It's family, she screamed. Do you want us ruined? Standing among my art, I finally saw them clearly, not powerful, not terrifying. Just small. Their identity wasn't character. It was credit. I can't sign, I said. I already gave the original to the police. The color drained from my father's face. 3 days later, Richard Realty filed for bankruptcy. 6 months after that, I stood in a Chelsea gallery. Study number 4 hung on the wall. A red dot marked it sold. The proceeds funded a scholarship for underprivileged art students in Chicago. I stepped to the microphone. They told me my difference was a defect, I said. They were wrong. Your difference is your currency. Your rejection is fuel. I smiled. My name is Mila, I said. And I am Vesper. I turned to a blank canvas and dipped my brush into gold. I had a new life to paint,